Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday evening episode of the Sports Crib. A lot of things to talk about tonight. Exciting game last night. We'll talk a little bit about that, some NBA things, maybe even touch on a couple of college things with this NIL continuously having and being in play. And let's welcome Chris to the broadcast. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, James. How you doing?
Uh, well, unfortunately, your method did not work for me.
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah.
When I looked up at the end, it was 116, 110.
Yep.
So your method did not work for me. I'm 0-1 for the Chris method here. So let's
Well,
see.
I'll let you know that. So I'm working on very little sleep tonight. My wife and I went to the Paul McCartney show at Fenway last night. So, as surprisingly, I actually did not watch the game. So, the curse still lives for me this playoffs, but again, it's a good thing for the Celtics. So I think I'll have some other plans on Friday night besides watching Game 4.
Oh man, but you know, it's been a long time since I lived in Boston. I actually lived down the North End.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my sister was a stewardess for Southwest, and one time early in her career, she was based up there, and I had quite a few friends that went to Berkeley, and so it was kind of fun. You can imagine living down in the North End back in the 80s.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure. Must have been a fun time.
Yeah, man. I see Mr. Hayes is here. How you doing tonight, Don?
Hey, James, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. I'm glad you came in because I was actually reading an article just before I came on about the Big 12. Uh, and, everybody talks about the SEC, but Don, you guys got a little money down there in Texas. I'm looking here. It says what the Big 12 had, what was this number again? 426 million in revenue.
Well, I mean, between Texas and Oklahoma, I mean you're talking some big donors there. Now,
Yeah.
now that money's not being raised, equally. I mean, Texas is going to raise a lot more money than TCU. Oklahoma's going to raise a lot more money than Baylor, but I mean, they're pretty serious about their football in Texas.
What about rumors of a commissioner? Any big names floating around?
Ever since Texas went to the SEC, I really haven't kept up with the inner politics of the Big 12, so I have no idea. So if I hear anything, I'll let you know.
Okay. But Chris was talking about he was at Fenway Park last night. How are your Rangers doing down there, Don?
What's that?
How's your Rangers doing?
They're a mystery team. One night they're looking like gangbusters. One night they suck. So still early in the season. I hope they can get some winning streaks going. But we'll see. Astros are sitting pretty. I think they'll be fine.
Well, so I'm gonna. There's a couple of other things new since I had sent out the topics, but LeBron, first acknowledged billionaire, and now he's talking about bringing it possibly an NBA team to Vegas. What do you think about that, Chris?
I mean, it's no surprise that LeBron's hit that billionaire status. He's been very, smooth with the moves he's made. He, got into beats early with Dre. I remember him being at Fenway and they had the beats with the Red Sox on the logo. And those were something I wanted as like a teenager. I'm like, oh, give me those. But he's just made smart business moves. He's got his Clutch company with Rich Paul, so he's already kind of dabbling in the sports business world. So I'm not surprised to see him want to pursue possibly owning a team. Vegas is a hot market right now. It seems like when the Golden Knights went there, that was kind of the big move, and then you had the Raiders follow suit. So they're definitely building a foundation to possibly try to support 4 teams out of Vegas. And they definitely have, the income in the city. And, if they want to spend the money and build these, fancy stadiums, I wouldn't see why teams wouldn't be interested in going there.
Now, Don, I was just before COVID. I was there when the stadium they first broke ground for the new Raiders Stadium and put in the monorail and all that good stuff. Made it very tourist attracting. But when you think of Vegas, Don, you think of sports betting, but now these teams moving there, and you have, on I think just about every state in the union except for 8, you can go on DraftKings or any of these other sports betting books or just simply contests. Don, what do you think about that? That proximity of sports teams, sports betting, and boom, another boom for Vegas. Is this the modern day attraction to Vegas now? Back in the day, we had the big, you had the big events. You might have a big fight there. You might have a world, some type of a world championship there. But Don, what do you think? The easiness of betting and new sports venues breaking up in Vegas.
Well, here's my thing on Vegas, and the history of Vegas. It goes back to, I believe, early '50s when the mob went out there and started building casinos and brothels and all that stuff. And I remember growing up, Vegas was always the place you went. It was like a place you go and gamble, and you could and they call it Sin City for a reason. You could gamble and do some other stuff. But now, if you look at the landscape, I think it's about every state has a casino. If you can prove that you have 1/32 Native American blood and you can get some people to form a tribe, you can build a casino. We have casinos in Texas now, and of course there's in Oklahoma. So I think Vegas has kind of lost its luster as being a go-to place. And so now it's what can we do to bring people in? People are starting to go to Vegas. I'm not saying Vegas isn't cool anymore. I'm just saying there's a lot of places you can go to, especially in, our economy as fuel prices rise. You go to closer places. But I think Vegas is in an area where let's bring something else in to bring, now they got football, and now LeBron's talking about basketball. They'll probably end up with the baseball team. I could see hockey going there. Of course, the idea of playing hockey in the desert is crazy, but
I think they do have a hockey team. I'm
do
not
they?
sure. I think they do.
Golden Knights.
Yeah, see, there you go.
There
There you go.
Yeah, hey, we got 2 teams out here in California. Who would have thought?
Yeah, we got one in Dallas. So, hey, James. By the way, sometimes we get off on different topics. Saturday it's going to be 106 in San Antonio. 106.
Yeah, I kind of tease. People think I live out here in California, and they're excuse me, and they're thinking about how hot it is, but I live 8 blocks from the ocean, downhill. So it's I can get the breeze and all that good stuff. So it's not quite that hot here. But up north and out, of course, out in the desert, Palm Springs and places like that, it's it's probably roasting out there. But I see Mr. Carroll is here also. Mr. Carroll, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, well, a lot's been going on, and I don't know. For some reason, my camera was acting up, so I had to swap out hot swap out one camera for another one. So this one's working. That one wasn't.
We were talking about LeBron hitting that billionaire mark and possibly bringing an NBA team to Vegas. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that I've learned is that if there's money to be made, people will try to make it. So it's a fast. In fact, I think Clark County is the second fastest growing county in America, last I checked, as of the most recent census data. So there's people, there's money. A lot of the people who are there are, of course, from other places, so they may have existing loyalties. But if there was suddenly, a franchise in their town, they might swap their loyalties. As we know, the Raiders already have departed for greener pastures, and the green in this case is money. And they have some of their older fans, their more established fans who do travel to Las Vegas because people like to go to Las Vegas anyway. So they've managed to maintain some of their old fan base and pick up, obviously, a lot of new fans. And the hope, if you are trying to move an NBA franchise there or start a new franchise there, is that since there has never been, outside of, I guess this is setting up for a Jerry Tarkanian joke, but with the exception of some of his teams, there hasn't been a professional basketball team in Las Vegas before. But it's certainly a market that is large, fairly flush with cash, and there's loads of places to play, so it shouldn't be too difficult.
Chris, there's been talk for the last at least 5 years about taking a team back to Seattle. What do you think about that? I mean, is there room for two teams? And I mean, of course, if you have a team in Seattle and a team in Vegas, that would be two teams, I would assume, in the Western Conference. Would we have to, make two teams in the Eastern Conference too?
Or
I wouldn't. Yeah, I would see you're more likely to realign it. Maybe push whatever you have that eastern border be. Maybe see some of those teams possibly in Texas bump over, maybe like a Houston or Dallas bump over a little bit. Or I mean, I guess you even have New Orleans, who's a Western Conference team, who could possibly bump into the East. So I see more reliant as far as Seattle goes. I mean, I'm a Northwest guy, so I would love to have a team in Seattle. Their fan base is passionate for them. I know a lot of my friends in Montana were Sonics fans. At the time when we were there, they actually did an exhibition game against the Warriors and came over and played at our college arena. I got to meet Gary Payton, Nate McMillan, so it was pretty cool. But as far as it goes, I think they can definitely support it. Having the success they've had with the Seahawks, I think kind of built a good foundation there for a solid sports town. And the Seattle Storm have been really good on the WNBA, so I feel like you can see some of those fans also transition to becoming NBA fans. They got the Kraken now for the NHL as well up there. This year was their first year, so they're definitely growing up there. So I wouldn't be surprised to possibly see a team in Seattle within the next decade.
Don, a renewal of that old rivalry between the Supersonics and the Spurs?
That would be nice. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I mean, Seattle is one of those cities that had their franchise taken away. We saw it happen in Houston. When they went up to became the Titans, and so I think it happened in New Orleans at one time, right? When they moved to Utah, and they kept the name Jazz, which is kind of humiliating because I don't think those people out in Utah listen to a lot of jazz. I don't think so.
Same thing with the Lakers.
Fun fact: the last general manager of that franchise before they made the move was a man named Morton Downey Jr.
Oh wow!
See, we can always depend on Bill to bring in those little facts in there. Bill, what do you think, Bill?
And I'm old enough to remember who Morton Downey Jr. was.
See, now you're telling on me too, Don. Come on. But
hey, Bill, interesting fact: his daughter was an actress named Rebecca De Mornay.
Yes.
Yes.
That is also true.
who got naked in a lot of her movies. So I watched a lot of Rebecca Dibble naked.
Now I'm getting a very early start to the Afc North segment of the show.
Where's Demetrius? Where's Demetrius?
Actually, I think Demetrius is still in Memphis, but we'll see if he does make it out here tonight.
Interesting fact: Elvis Presley lost his virginity in Memphis.
Yeah.
Maybe Demetrius is on to something.
Yes, maybe Demetrius found it.
Bill, what do you think? That financial market, a realignment to two teams in the East. Are you at Chris?
I mean, the natural thing would be to realign and to take a couple of the teams that are, as Chris has pointed out, who are probably towards the middle of the country and push them a little further east. The fact is that, and this is not new to anybody who knows about American demographics, is that if you look at sort of the map of the country in terms of population density, you've got a lot of people on each coast, and then increasingly people are heading south, right? If you sort of were to, use time-lapse photography and like use little dots or whatever, you see the dots, go from these edges of the country and the Rust Belt and things like that, go up, out, and then down, right? And then in the case of Las Vegas, they're going east, right? Not all the people who flooded Las Vegas recently are from California, but a lot of them are. And a decent number of people are now from Chicago, in fact, have relocated there. So there are some natives of Las Vegas, but they probably feel a bit outnumbered, I'm guessing, by this point, because of all the people who've made their way to their city. But the fact is that, there was a time when Fort Wayne had a team, like the American population has changed. Syracuse had a franchise, right? There's lots of NBA franchises. If they were to all go back to where they began, right, counting the former ABA franchises that are now in the NBA, you would now have teams in Buffalo, Syracuse. So you have two teams in upstate New York, right? If we went back to the original locations, you would have the Chaparrals didn't make it. No, darn it. But neither did the Kentucky Cougars. But you'd have a bunch of teams in what we call the Rust Belt, right? Pittsburgh Pipers would be back doing their thing. So the fact is that the Rust Belt lost a lot of, humans, amongst other things. So the NBA used to be all East Coast, pretty much. The Lakers were like one of the westernmost teams before they went to Los Angeles. If you go back to the early days of the NBA, the Minneapolis Lakers were the westernmost franchises at one point, James. So it's only natural that they follow the people and follow the cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That's how things work in America.
Yeah.
I would think it'd be Memphis and New Orleans probably be the top two teams, especially.
Right, I was going to say those would be the two I would move.
Still in the West because they were Vancouver and then got moved, so it doesn't really make sense for them to be in the West.
Well, Minnesota. I'm not sure, where you could put them. I think that might be a viable move, but it would be interesting to see what the repercussions of adding one more team would be. Possibly opening up more jobs, of course, and more revenue for the cities that are involved. But I was looking at some of the players that we know that will probably move during this off season, and after watching the Heat, one of the things that came to my mind is Donovan Mitchell. What do you think about that move? I know Pat Riley said, that they're going to, stay pat, but with the performances of Hero and some other people, Hero, health issues, not sure about what they're going to do with Bam. Chris, what do you think? Donovan Mitchell in a package to the Heat?
I don't really see it right now. I think as far as what their team needs, I think they need more of a point guard floor general rather than a scorer like Donovan Mitchell because they're going to have Butler on the court. They got Hero. They got Bam Adebayo. They're going to have Duncan Robinson off the bench. So they're going to have plenty of guys that get Strus. They have plenty of guys who can shoot the ball. I think they need that floor general guy who can, operate the offense. They tried it with Kyle Lowry. I just think he's a few years past when he could have serviced them. So I think they're more going to be in the point guard market rather than trying to package anything for Donovan Mitchell.
What do you think there, Don? With the different changes that are being made, Quentin Snyder's decided to move on as a coach. We kind of previewed that last week, even though it hadn't been talked about yet. After 8 years, he's left the team. What do you think, Don? Don.
I don't know. I don't think you can hear it.
I don't think you can. Can you hear us, Don?
If he can, he's an amazing actor.
Bill, we lost your mic there, Don. We can't hear you.
Oh, well, he's muted. Okay, he's unmuted. Oh, he's poking around.
Sure.
I don't know what's going on.
Can you hear us, Don?
You're underwater. Well, okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you. Yeah. We can hear you now.
What was that?
Evidently, the Uber is here, but no. What do you think, Don? Moves for the Heat after they went through that 7-game series with the Celtics.
Well, I mean, the Eastern Conference was unbelievable as far as the excitement in the playoffs and all that. I mean, remember I picked Boston, but I said it would go 7 games, and sure enough, it did. But I'm in that kind of that way of thinking. If it's not broke, don't fix it. They might be able to add a few players in the offseason, but I like their core. They probably could use a little bit more depth, but I like Miami as a team.
Chris, now I don't know if this is a rumor or if this is really true, but what do you think about the addition of Mike Conley in a package with the Celtics?
Yeah, I saw that, and I haven't heard much of that, so that's kind of news to me. I would again be surprised. He would be a guy I think might be a Heat target rather than a Celtics target. Celtics right now we're swimming in guards. We just signed Marcus Smart to a new contract. We have Peyton Pritchard, we have Aaron Nesmith, Romeo Langford. The guard depth with the Celtics right now is pretty deep, and those guys will be trade pieces at some point, I think. But I don't think it's going to be for a guy like Mike Conley. I like him as a player. I think he's a great veteran. I think he might fall into the boat with Kyle Lowry, where whoever does pick him up might not see the return they're expecting for him. But I don't expect that to be the Celtics. I don't think they're in the market for a guy like Mike Conley right now.
We talked about the effect of this series on Al Horford and whether this winning a ring would make him a Hall of Famer. But speaking of those guys, do you think that Al will be back?
I think so. I mean, he's a guy I could see just playing out the rest of his career with the Celtics. If they hopefully play things out and win. Don, I don't know if you know, I'm in Boston. I'm a Celtics guy, so I'm going big for the Celtics. Unfortunately, I'm cursed this playoffs. Pretty much when I don't watch the team, they play better when I do watch the team. So I didn't watch Game 3, and of course they won by 16 points. So I definitely think they can. But I'm pretty onexcited about it. But again, the Celtics, What was your question, James? I got off track. So
I was talking about
out.
I was talking about whether or not you thought that Al Horford would be
Oh yeah,
coming
Al.
back.
So yeah, I mean, after that huge thing, so if they can get the win this year, I think he might be, a guy that might mull retirement. But I like I said, I think he's going to play out his career with the Celtics. I don't think he likes it in Boston. The fans have responded to him very well, especially with his second trip here. Again, a lot of it will be dictated on what happens here in this playoff run. Again, I'm hoping for good things, but I could see him, be a guy who finishes out his career with Boston.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because your big man or your future big man would seem to be Mr. Williams.
Yeah,
you do have health issues, but that's why I was asking you about the availability. Do you think of Horford next year?
Yeah, like he provides that depth and that protection and just that presence. Like the Celtics are a very young team, so having that veteran guy in the locker room has just been huge. You can just see what he's done, and the game he had in Game 1 was just phenomenal. It was great to see a guy like Al in his first playoffs or his first finals, have just a great game like that and kind of set the tone for his team. So I think a lot of it, like I said, will be dependent on what they win here, but I think he'll be a Celtic for the rest of his career.
Now, we did see a reversal of what I had put down for the first question, and that was the fact that Tatum and Brown had 45 points in Game 2, and the rest of the starters only had 6 points. But what about the inconsistency of your role players?
I mean, I think it's a lot of it goes through whether you're getting the offensive production from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. If one of those guys are slacking, you see better production out of the role players. Like Derrick White, I think, had 7 points last night, but he's been phenomenal during the playoffs. He had a couple 22-point games. Like he's been a great player off the bench for them. Same thing with Peyton Pritchard. These guys are sparks. So you might not see that consistency and having 30, 40 points off your bench. But like I said, a lot of that's dictating on how Jason, Jaylen are playing, because if they're playing well, the ball's going to go through them. Otherwise, if they're in foul trouble or turning the ball over, not playing well, then you're going to see those other guys get in the lineup. But when you have a good game from Jason and Jaylen like last night, you're not going to see that production out of role players.
Don, Steph Curry, as he said that he would be available for Game 4, but we came close to or at least thinking that Steph might be injured again and might not be available for Game 4. But Don, what do you think about the Warriors have won a road game in their last 26 playoff series? They lost last night, but do you think that streak is still going to continue?
Well, we talk about Vegas. You go with the odds. If you're in Vegas, I would throw some money on that. I mean, great championship teams win on the road. I mean, that's just the way it goes. If you remember going back to the past, my Spurs, I think the Spurs won more playoff games on the road than about any team several years ago. So, I mean, that's just a hallmark of a championship team. And if Golden State is going to – I'm sorry. Yeah, if Golden State is to pull it off, they're going to have to win on the road. That's just the way it goes. I mean, you can't just be – the beast at home. You have to produce when you're going out of town.
Chris, is this a 2-2-1-1-1?
Yeah, that's their format. So, and then my big key for you guys to look out for moving forward here in the series is when I was looking at some research, I guess after Game 2 when the Warriors exploded in the third quarter, some irate Boston fan went on Reddit and just ripped up a bunch of stats about how great the Warriors are as a third quarter team. I don't know if you guys saw that. So, of course, in Game 2, it was 52-50 at half, and the Warriors ended up leading 87-64 going in the fourth quarter. So since 2014, the Warriors have the highest third quarter point differential They scored 1,837 points. It's about 2.2 times more than the second highest total point differential for any team in any quarter during that time span. So the third quarter has been key for the Warriors. So we'll see if Boston can overcome that moving forward.
One of the things that kind of didn't upset me, but it didn't make sense to me, being, part of any sports team, the players complaining about the crowd. I mean, we kind of went through this. We talked about this when we were talking about the Russell Westbrook situation, and I can't bring my family. Look, I think if you take your family into a hostile environment, there are certain things that you are supposed to expect. If you play for a rival team and you're sitting in the front row without an umbrella, then either as they say, Bill, be prepared. You're not prepared. So, what's your take on these players complaining about? I mean, has anybody ever been to the dog pound in Cleveland wearing a Pittsburgh shirt? I mean, come on, Chris. I mean, come on, do we need a little thicker skin here? I mean, for the amount of money that I'm paying you to put a ball through a hoop, I mean, really?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a part of the game, especially these guys that are veterans. I mean, Draymond Green should be a guy who has thicker skin. I saw some people put on Twitter of how he's cursed with, I think it was his son next to him in a press conference after a game. He's like, "How'd you play?" He's like, "I played like shit." So he can't then go say about how Boston fans are ragging him and what they'll make views. Listen, I'm a Boston fan. We're brutal, even to our own players. Like, it's just, you have to also know where you're at. Like, you're not playing in like Indiana or Oklahoma, these Midwest places, or even a Portland, where you just don't have that atmosphere, the history. Like, people in Boston have been are born into sports, so we're fans from a young age. Like, you've seen, I'm sure, the memes on the internet of the little Red Sox fan throwing up the middle finger. Like, it's just what we are. Like, unfortunately, we are harsh to, like I said, our own players at times. We can be brutal fans, but it's just part of it also that I think that fans, embrace that passion that, when you come to Boston, those opposing teams are going to hear it, and we have a home court advantage. And, guys like Draymond need to get thicker skin for sure.
What's your thoughts on that, Don? I mean, like I said, you're making, so many millions of dollars to play a game, and you have on a rival's uniform. I mean, come on, how many Oklahoma fans sit in, the student section of Texas?
Never. I mean, it was just about 10 years ago that a guy walked in a bar in Norman, Oklahoma, wearing a UT shirt. He got castrated.
Yeah.
He got in a fight. The guy held him down and cut his nuts off.
Oh, I mean,
that's
that. Verbally.
No, this is Texas, Chris. They don't do anything verbally. You do everything violently.
This was Oklahoma.
Right, Oklahoma. But the same rules apply.
Yeah.
It was a guy wearing cut-off shorts with the mullet who probably did it. So, but anyway, yeah. So sports, unfortunately, when you take a rabid fan who is just all into it, and you add some alcohol, and in a closed, like basketball in a closed arena, it can get ugly. I mean, we've seen players go after fans. We've seen in hockey, I've seen hockey players go in the stands, and then you're talking about being a Pittsburgh fan in Cleveland, be a Cowboy fan in Philadelphia. I mean, it's Philadelphia fans are nuts. I mean, they have a jail in their stadium for them.
Yeah.
And, I remember when Michael Irvin hurt his neck, they were cheering.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they one year they pelted Santa Claus with snowballs. Come on. So, yeah, unfortunately, sports it brings out the best in us sometimes. It brings out the worst in us sometimes. So if you're going to play the game, especially get paid millions and millions of dollars, that's just one of those things you have to put up with, unfortunately. You're going to be called all kind of names. They're going to insult your girlfriend, your mom. They're going to question your sexuality. That's just part of the game. You got to deal with it.
Yeah. Like you said, Don, I mean, there was, I don't know about now, but I mean, there was a time, when they did question your sexuality, or certain words came out that I don't know, politically correct to use some of those words or not, but I mean, there was a time when, you so and so, and how many, Bill, how many of your mama jokes have you heard playing quarterback?
Well, so the thing is, of course, I mean, generally people would stick to other things, but every once in a while, mothers would get involved. But most of the time, guys would say things to you like "too slow," right? Now, a lot of that, or you just can't, you can't guard me, you can't check me. I mean, you hear a lot of that. But when you're talking about certain cities, and of course, everyone goes to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia sort of brought it on themselves, I guess, to some extent. But it's not like they have like a monopoly. I mean, and
it's not like they couldn't put a jail in Fenway Park now,
several other places while we're at it. But I mean, we're talking about here. I mean, we can't hold a candle to some stuff's happening in soccer arenas. I mean, I remember a very famous picture of a guy and the funny thing is the guy's like smiling and he's like all, he's got his scarf around his neck, and it was Glasgow versus, I can't remember who it was, but he's got a dart in the bridge of his nose, and he's being carried from the arena. There was a time when guys used to, in various British, they had huge riots, but used to take hatchets because guns are hard to get, but they'd take hatchets and then saw down the handle of them and put them into the lining of their coats. So, I mean, no matter what you think of America, there's places where they're well beyond us in terms of what goes on around their sporting cultures and societies and what it can cost you if you make a bad call and all that kind of stuff. So when people's passions get involved, no matter what we're talking about, politics, sports, religion, anything, when people's passions get whipped up to that extent, and it's usually things like that, like sports, politics, religion, where people get so polarized and so passionate that they will literally become murderous, you're going to see some things happen. I mean, they talk about how during the Super Bowl, what happens, right? Anybody here have a friend who's like an EMT or a cop or whatever? If you have friends or EMTs or cops, whatever, they don't tend to enjoy working on Super Bowl Sunday because domestic violence calls go up, right? It's a sad fact, but look at the data. There's a distinct spike in domestic violence calls right after, or sometimes even during, but mostly it's right after the Super Bowl. So people get a little too into it, quite frankly. But it's not just us. It's not just America. It's all over.
Yeah, like I said, it's the way that people act like this is something new. I think it's been going on for quite some time. Once again, it's it's also the age of social media where things are instantly out there on YouTube or TikTok or whatever you really. Whatever media that you really like. So now, the things have become different, I believe. Any final thoughts on the playoffs there, Chris?
I mean, I'm excited. Like I said, I picked the Celtics in 6, so I'm still liking that pick. And again, the juju and the curse is still alive, Bill, like I was telling the guys. So, I won't be watching Game 4. I'll have to find something else to do Friday night.
Friday night in Boston is not bad. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and then
maybe
like back to like a little bit on the fandom as we were like leaving the Paul McCartney show last night at Fenway, a Go Celtics chant breaks out. You know, they have the Go Seas on the building. So, you know, our fan base, no matter where we're at, we're cheering for our teams. So I'll still have my jersey on. I'll be checking the score, and you know, I'll be there in spirit.
like I said, well, we'll see. I think I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to watch this game because, well, we'll see. But
We'll see how it works out.
it does seem, like 1-1. One game at home. Everybody loses a game at home. I'll be very interested to see when we start the 1-1-1. If if it gets that far. Don, any final thoughts there on the playoffs before we start talking a little NFL?
No, I still think the Celtics take it in 7. That's just my gut feeling. And I'm sure Paul McCartney thought that was kind of weird, this Englishman hearing all this Celtic chant. That's probably kind of
He put
strange.
on a hell of a show, guys. If he, I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he's finishing up the tour, but if he comes around your neck of the woods anytime soon, check it out for sure.
I got to see Paul McCartney in concert. He played the very first concert at the Alamo Dome back in 1993.
This
awesome.
is my first concert I've ever gone to at Fenway, so it's definitely a good one.
Oh, good. So James, I sent you a message earlier, James. I have to go to the airport and pick up somebody.
Yeah,
So I got short, but hopefully I'll be able to be here next week. And
any final thoughts you got? Any events you got coming up at school?
So the UT women's girl softball team, they're on the verge of eliminated in the World Series, but they weren't even expected to be there for softball. Longhorn baseball, they're peaking at the right time. Ivan Melendez, keep that name on your mind. He'll probably be in the first 5 picks in the draft. He's got 30 home runs. He's NCAA. Hook 'em horns.
All right, Don. Do you have a good night, man?
You too, guys.
Talk to you next week.
Take care and God bless.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I just sent Mike a message, so Mike should be coming in pretty soon.
It's gonna be an early one for me too, James. I'll get in a little football, but when we get into the conference, I'm probably gonna head out. I'm on fumes today.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
We get in a little NFL. I'm happy to talk some NFL real quick.
Well, let's. I'm sure Mike will be here soon, but we can get into a little NFL. I know. Well, I didn't. I figured I was going to ask you what you were doing last night, but since you told us now, it's kind of evident. But we talked a lot about Tom Brady and Bruce Arians and the relationship and what was there this much friction, was there that much? What do you think, Chris? Now that Tom has a new head coach.
I think it's good for him. I think when there was so many reports of friction with Bruce Arians, where there's always kind of smoke, I assume there's fire. So maybe it wasn't to the extent people talked about. There was probably some friction there, but it seems like Bruce Arians is still going to be a piece of that team. You saw him in the draft room on draft day, so he's definitely still going to be a part of that Bucs organization. I think it's a good start for Todd Bowles getting back into the coaching realm. Having a guy like Tom Brady at the helm should give him a little bit of comfort. And help get his feet settled here with the new position. And Tom is pretty much a head coach on the field. So, like I said, for Todd Bowles, it's a good start for him. And I expect a good season here for the Buccaneers.
What's your thoughts on Tom and a new head coach, Bill?
Well, when we think about, first of all, Todd Bowles finally gets a real chance. No offense to the Jets, but gets a real chance to show what he can do as a head coach. And I'm very excited about that. I remember watching Todd Bowles playing for Bruce Arians at Temple University when he was a terrific safety many years ago. And, of course, he was a terrific safety in the NFL for 11 seasons. Don't quote me on that, something like that. But so I've been a fan of Todd Bowles for probably close to 40 probably close to 40 years, going back to his playing days. So I'm happy to see this for him. I think that there's going to be a fair amount of mutual respect between he and Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. And I feel pretty confident whether the team reaches the same heights that it did, in recent days. I mean, it's hard to do. Like that, they designed it to be hard to do. Like they decided towards the end of the 80s or even before that, but that, hey, let's do what we can to not let super teams exist anymore. So things that have happened in terms of salary cap and almost everything has happened to try to instill competitive balance. And then, the Patriots did what they did, and the NFL's like, well, okay, we that didn't quite do what we thought it would, but it's so hard to stay on top, right? I mean, it's extremely hard. It's extremely hard to repeat. It's extremely hard even just to continue to be a contender year after year. So even if the team doesn't perform at the levels that it has recently, I still think Todd Bowles will show that he deserves to be a head coach, and I think the team will have a solid season, but I'm thinking they're more like an 11-ish win team this year than some of the teams they've had recently.
Chris, what do you think about the retirement of Roman Cromwell at the Texans, and now we have a new coach also with the Texans? What do you expect?
Now, is Romeo Crennel's cousin, his brother?
No, it's his great uncle, but
yeah, I mean, a guy like Romeo, I mean, he, of course, I mean, I grew to know him here when he was with the Patriots. So, I mean, he, of course, has been in the league for a long time. Did good things here. I always wished him the best of luck when he had his head coaching positions. Some of them worked out better than others, but I always, liked what he was able to do with the Patriots here. A great guy, great man, and much respect to him as he heads off into the sunset. But who knows if he's a guy that maybe actually retires or maybe comes back and noses around in a front office or something like that.
What do you think about a front office job there, Bill?
I mean, I guess you can't wholly rule it out. I haven't heard anything like that. I think he's going to spend time being retired, but I mean, we'll see. Some guys are true lifers, and they can't get away from the game. He might find his way maybe into, I think a great place for him to be is USA Football. They usually tend to go after offensive guys. When you see, some of the bigger names that end up working in even as a consultant, it's almost always people who are on the offensive side of the ball. It'd be nice to see a sort of big name defensive player, defensive coach. But he played defense also these days to be over on that side. My first memories of him go all the way back to him working for Steve Sloan and defensive coordinator named Bill Parcells, right, at Texas Tech back in the 70s. And then, eventually when Parcells gets an NFL job, he follows him there too. And, was on those great Giants teams of the mid to or early, really, to late 1980s. And then, continues to be reunited with Parcells. The next two places he hops, and then of course he finds his way to the Browns. But I mean, he's always been a terrific assistant coach. I think he's, though they don't induct defensive coaches or assistant coaches, period, as directly into the Hall of Fame. You have to make it as something else. He's not going to make it unless they sort of change the contributor rules to allow assistant coaches to get in. But he's a Hall of Fame level defensive coordinator. And one of the great people. Like, he's one of the really good people in the league, if that matters. I can't find anyone to say a bad word about Rack, as they call him. And, I mean, I've never heard anybody say, I mean, when you are around the game as long as you've been around and nobody has anything bad to say, that tells you a lot.
Yeah, it does.
I wouldn't be surprised maybe the XFL throws, a bag at him maybe a little bit, because they've been looking at some names like him that, I guess the Rock's running things there now, and he definitely wants to build a good product. So, maybe he might be an interesting name for them to throw around.
Speaking of, we always talk about, teams up against the salary cap, and how they work out their business. And a lot of us point to New Orleans, and how they've been able to somehow work magic with their salary cap. But Chris, Aaron Donald, he earns now what, $40 million. He got a $40 million raise after reworking his contract. Now yesterday, Cooper Kupp signs a 3-year, $110 million extension. Have the Rams become the best well-run team in the NFL, Chris?
I mean, I don't know where they're getting the money from, and honestly, they must have a money print machine in their new facility, because I don't know how they're paying these guys, because every high name profile seems to just be landing with the Rams the last 3 years. So I don't know how they can keep it up. Something's got to give at some point. I don't understand how, because I mean, Aaron Donald's getting $95 million before the end of the 2024 season. Now you have Cooper Kupp getting 110 before the end of the 2025 season. And then you have Jalen Ramsey on the books. You have Matt Stafford's contract on the books. Who else is going to come up next? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some other name that, is off a team at some point here. And hey, he ends up with the Rams. So I'm shocked at how they decide these guys. I don't know what's going on, but whoever their CFO is, he's a genius.
Bill, bring the math.
It's funny. I did a video about this not long ago on Zinni62 Media. And I talked about how they've been able to do this. One, despite the fact that we always pay a lot of attention to sort of the splashy big names, the reason they can do this is because of their great success in drafting late, right? So the fourth round onward, over the last 3 draft years, no team has had as much success in terms of contribution of late drafted players than the Rams have. Players drafted, they've had more games played than any other team in the NFL by players drafted in the fourth round and later. And those players are cheap. I mean, there's no two ways around it. So what they're able to do is essentially be a team of haves and have-nots. And they have no middle class really on their team. And it's difficult to pull it off, but they've done it. The other thing is they're willing to front load. If you look at these contracts, you'll see a lot of that money comes off the books quickly. Most teams do the opposite. They spread it out. Voidable years, all this other stuff. In fact, that's Kari Haley. You mentioned the Saints. Shout out to Kari Haley, who is one of the bright young black front office people in the NFL, who is the cap manager for the Saints. And so people keep talking about, how do they do it? Ask Kari Haley. He's out there, guys, making it happen. But in terms of what they do the opposite of what most teams do. Most teams want to spread out the pain. They're just ready to just take the pain. Right, they're going to front load a lot of that money so that instead of having the poison pill come later, like it did for the Saints and some other teams, they're going to swallow the poison pill now. So they're going to have their window. It will slam shut but reopen fairly quickly, as opposed to slowly closing like the Saints had it do. They've taken the sort of opposite approach. We're going to front load a bunch of money. Here, you want this money? Boom, here it is now. Right. You don't have to wait. It's not coming to you. It's not Bobby Bonilla to you for the next 28 years. It's the exact opposite. We're going to give you a bunch of guaranteed salary over the first couple years of your contract. We're going to give you a whole big old giant signing bonus right up front. And then you're going to have very little to no guaranteed money in a couple of years. And so if it's done correctly, and it's not easy to do correctly, you can flip your roster fairly quickly without going through all the, oh, God, we're in cap hell that people talk about. They can get in and out of hell very quickly if they do this right. And it looks like they are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it like base salary for Aaron Donald's $1.5 million, base salary for Stafford's $1.5 million.
Yep.
Allen Robinson's $1.5 million.
Yep.
I mean, their base salary is ridiculous, and they got $13 million signing bonuses.
That's how you do it. You front load.
It's interesting. Definitely, any young GMs coming up, look at what this team's doing and kind of, research that, make some connections for sure, and figure out how to keep this going, because it definitely seems to be a successful method.
Yep. I talked about it in the video.
Go check out those videos, then.
I'm going to let you go after this topic here, but it's kind of ridiculous in a lot of ways, because first of all, I had no understanding of an individual whose mind thinks like this, but I mean, you know, we talk about what's the mythological beast? He's a bull on one half, and
The
a man
Minotaur.
on, yeah, yeah. Uh, do you think that perhaps there might be some ancestry here to Deion Watson?
Oh,
Deshaun Watson, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I mean,
uh,
66 masseuses in
that's ridiculous.
17
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, it's in a 17-month span. He had 66 of these. Now 24 have become accusations against him. He's got his lawyer just spouting nonsense on the radio. I don't know if you heard it.
oh yeah.
It's crazy. I'll have it on the podcast. My podcast dropping tomorrow, so go check that out. We'll get into it a little bit. But it's
Did we freeze, Chris? I mean,
I don't
Chris.
think. Oh, there it is. We're back.
Yeah.
So I'm saying after 24 accusations, I'm confident that something has happened. It seems to be a consistent serial type of thing, I want to say. But the Browns definitely have themselves in a pickle here after doing their somewhat of due diligence. They say that they did and did research, all that, and then of course you had grand juries make their decisions, but they still decided to give this guy $230 million, and he's probably not even gonna. I don't even know if he's gonna see the field for him this year. So the Browns definitely are in for it. I saw some stories already talking about them if they want to try to potentially trade Sean Watson now, and I don't think anyone's gonna want to touch him at all. So they're in a situation. I don't think Baker Mayfield wants to play for them either. If they're gonna be like, "Hey Baker, we're sorry," pull up to his house. Hey, how can we remedy this situation? Let's try to fix this. I don't see that happening. So the Browns are, up Schitt's Creek, I'll say. But yeah, Deshaun Watson, it looks like he's not a good guy.
Pull up outside the house playing real loud. If you can't do the one you love the one you live.
Chris, give us your final thoughts for the evening, man. And
yeah, guys, it was always great to chopping up with you. I'm sorry I'm on fumes tonight. I'll be 100% for next week. I'm looking forward to it. Thursday night, also, our show will be during Game 6, so we'll see. Hopefully, if things haven't ended before then, might be a big game that night. So I'll be up and down during the podcast. So I suggest fans tune in and watch and see my roller coaster of emotions during the 3-hour show that we'll have, I'm sure, that night. And then everyone check out the podcast, A Bit Inside Pod, on Twitter and Instagram. Just A Bit Inside Podcast on wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, thank you, man. You have a great night, and thanks for staying up with us a little bit.
Yeah, always fun chat with you guys, and I'll see you guys next week for sure.
All right,
have a good one.
Bill, I'm hoping that we can get Mike in tonight. Because since we have some extra time and I have 2 fantasy football gurus in here, I had an extra topic that I wanted to kind of throw in at you guys. But Bill, being an officer and a gentleman, 66? Really? I mean.
So, first of all, some people worry about like off-season conditioning. Is somebody staying in shape, taking care of themselves, etc. It's clear that at least some part of him is in tip-top condition. There's a lot happening there, right? What is clear to any and all, and once again, I don't pretend to know, what happened in the room, who did what, and all that stuff. I mean, some of this will come out, and frankly, some of it will never see the light of day. I think that there'll be a lot of discussion about what this means for the long term in how the NFL is perceived, quite frankly. How serious they are to be taken regarding what they value in terms of values, and whether or not he is proven guilty of anything, right? Other than obviously really seriously poor judgment. There are people who will never see the league the same way if indeed he has a short or not significant suspension. And the NFL cares very much about how it's perceived, James, as I'm sure you already know.
Well, see, that's one of the things that I'm wondering because now we have this renewed so-called emphasis on the new version of the Rooney Rule, where women you have to uh, interview women and for different roles within your organization. I mean, how can the NFL not when they're putting these programs in the forefront as you said, the changing face of the NFL, and now you have a man that's accused of all of these different offenses, and you do nothing. I mean, like you said, blowback, political blowback. I mean, even if you think of a possible economic impact in a time of inflation. I mean, there are many ramifications here. I think if the NFL doesn't act, what's your thoughts on
Um, I think we've certainly reached a point where the NFL is going to take some sort of strong action. The NFL is going to have to, right? And we always talk about the protecting of the shield. And as much as, a 26-year-old quarterback who is probably just in what should be the heart of the prime of his career is something the NFL cares about and prizes, they care about and prize even more than that how the NFL is perceived, like I said. And it should be mentioned how large corporations perceive the NFL. I mean, they have a contract with the Department of Defense. They have contracts. They have a lot of contracts. There's a lot of money that flows into the league, and they know that. I mean, you've heard this before, but you can't lose the church's money, James. You can't lose the church's money. So if anything's going to mess with the church's money, that something is going to be sacrificed. So, like I said, I don't pretend. I grew up in the home of a lawyer who at one point was a Commonwealth's attorney in the state of Virginia, and I heard a few things and read a few things, but I'm not a lawyer and never desired to be a lawyer. But I know this much I can tell you, that this is not going to go away quietly or easily. And this is going to be seen as a watershed moment for the NFL in the way that its fastest growing segment of fans, the fastest growing segment of fans the NFL has, is women between the ages of 18 and 34. If I used to look for Nielsen. But yeah, the fastest, because they sort of maxed out a lot of the male population, quite frankly. I mean, they might be to squeeze a little bit more out, but basically all the men that are going to follow football in America are pretty much doing it already. The NFL knows that without leaving the country, the only other major growth place for them, with demographically speaking, is women. They know this. If I know it, they know it, right? I promise you they know it. This is going to be a moment where they're going to announce to those millions of women what the NFL thinks about the feelings of women. And I like I said, I don't know if he misses a whole year, but he's going to miss a significant part of a year. I can promise you that. Like, I'll be shocked if he doesn't miss the majority of at least one season. And maybe they end up reducing it to less than, well, probably not much less. He might get, if not a whole season, then I think the majority of the season, it might get talked down to 10 or 8 or something. But I think he's getting whacked pretty seriously.
Yeah, I'm thinking 8 to 12, 8 minimum.
Sounds about right to me too. Yeah.
In a 17 game season. So, but we'll see. There's, I guess the reason why I don't understand the motivation is I mean, this is truly a super predator. If the numbers are
Right.
anywhere
Even if
near
the numbers are, let's say the numbers are half what we've heard.
yeah,
Right. Let's just say that. Let's just whack half off and just bring it down to, sorry to use that term, I guess, but let's bring it down to 50% of what we were talking about. Even if it's 33, that's a eye-catching number.
yeah. I mean, it's just and now not just the team, but now it's also seems like at least some of these women are also suing the Texans,
Mhm.
which which I think I mean now that you're talking about a team, you know, the Shield is certainly involved.
100%.
So I mean, you're not only talking about just the integrity of the team, but you're talking about the overseeing of the NFL. But uh, uh, do you think that is going to make this uh, stand out even more?
Well, I mean, yeah, it already has, right? I mean, I don't think there's any will. It has. It has. It has called into question if this can be proven to be true, or even, I mean, we're talking about civil as well as a criminal. You don't have to prove it necessarily. You just have to make it clear that it's more likely than not, right? So the preponderance of evidence required for a civil case is much lower, right? The bar is set much lower. You simply have to show it's more likely than not that something happened, as opposed to beyond the classic beyond the shadow of a doubt in a criminal case. So if it looks like it's more likely than not that the Texans actively protected and facilitated Deshaun Watson in his activities, so in addition to opening up another big giant pot of money for people to sue out of, additionally, it does besmirch the entire league to some extent. The fact is that oversight, despite the fact that there is a quote unquote commissioner, oversight is actually pretty lax in the NFL. The 32 teams, I mean, they follow the bylaws and things like that, but it's not like the commissioner comes by and checks on everybody every couple of weeks, James. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how it works. He doesn't swagger in like, the sheriff into the saloon and see how everybody's acting. Or no, he sits in his office on 30 Madison. I think it's 30 Madison Avenue. Don't quote me on that. I think that's something like that. But wherever it is, I think it's 6th and Madison, wherever it is, 5th and Madison. But wherever it is, the office is again. He's in that office, making deals and talking to people and looking at data and hiring and firing and all the stuff that you do when you're at the top of a large, very successful organization. But what he doesn't do is, like I said, patrol, check, inquire as to how teams are doing. Hey, Dan, heard something kind of disturbing about what's going on with your cheerleaders. Any truth to that? No, he doesn't do that, right? There are people who do investigations for the NFL. They're usually retired or, former Secret Service and marshals and whatever, but they're only called in after the fact, right? There's no prevention programs. I mean, they have stuff for the players, but there's no things for the franchises in terms of, hey guys, don't do this thing. They don't do that. Hey, don't encourage what could be seen as a sexual scandal within your organization. They don't do that. There's no proactive going out and telling owners and front office people, hey, don't do this horrible thing that will look terrible. They don't do that, right? They once again, once it happens, they investigate or whatever, but there's no prior enforcement power where they go out and say, hey guys, just in case you're thinking about doing something like this, like an enormous sex scandal, don't, and here's why not. No, that's not something he does. It's not part of his job, or he doesn't see it as part of his job. They deal with it as it comes when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, it looks terrible already. And even if it turns out not to be exactly true, it doesn't look great. If it turns out it is true, ouch.
Like you said, even if it's just 50%. You know, but Mike isn't going to be joining us this evening, so I'm going to have to get my fantasy football information from you here. So,
Oh
uh,
boy.
I'm sure between you and Mike, I know there's over 100 dynasty leagues. We
Yeah,
have,
he's got like 97% of that number, but okay.
we,
I
we,
dabble in it. He lives in it, but okay, sure. Let's
you
do it.
know, well, I'm going to start off in my favorite division, of course, the AFC North. And I'm going to start with I'm going to put them in the order that I think that we're going to come in this year. Now, we'll get into records in that in a few moments, but I'm going to start with the Bungles. Uh, Went all the way to the Super Bowl unexpectedly, of course, but it seems that uh, Lyle Collins is going to be the best addition to the Bungles O line. What do you think about the addition of Collins after we saw what happened to that breakdown of the Bungles offensive line during the Super Bowl?
Sure. And it was, probably the most predictable thing in the world, right? I remember saying that what I thought would turn the tide of the game would be that they would at some point struggle to protect him. When I picked that game, and here's what I will say: Lyle Collins, of course, you all remember the very sort of bizarre beginning to his career, where he was a projected no later than maybe late first round player. Some people might say early second, but either way, everyone on the planet saw him as a top 50 player. And then, due to being a person of interest, unfortunately, in a young lady with whom he previously had a romantic relationship, she had been tragically murdered. And, like I said, even though he was never charged or anything, being a person of interest was enough, for, him to end up going undrafted. And, though he at one point claimed he might, or maybe it was his agents, I don't know if he said it, but said that he might try to get back into college and play out the next year, but it didn't happen. He, as an draft free agent, was signed and had a nice run with the Cowboys, and the Cowboys released him with 3 years left on his contract. Of course, that in essence that 3 years has not been picked up by the Bengals. Things you like about him. He's going to help their run game right away. He's a very large, very powerful man, and very good run blocker. Not a bad pass blocker, but I mean, he really is a really good run blocker. He's one of the better run blocking guards in the NFL. And when the Cowboys' run game was clicking, he was a big part of it. What remains to be seen is exactly where he'll play. Obviously, he can play either guard position, and I've seen him play a little bit of right tackle in his career as well. But wherever it is they drop him, he should be an upgrade over what they had before. As I mentioned previously, when we were breaking down the game prior to Super Bowl, they had exactly one offensive lineman that I liked a little bit coming out of college, and that's Hakeem Adeniji. The rest of them were all guys I did not like as college prospects. And I was rather surprised that so many of them were playing so much at the NFL level. And I think that's going to slowly, surely change. I think that this year, next year, I'll be shocked if there's more than 2 holdovers, say by 2020. By the time the 2025 season begins, I bet there'll be no more than 2, and possibly less, 2 holdovers on that offensive line that they currently have. They know it's their biggest place of weakness, and they're going to upgrade it. I don't think they're done working on it.
How many TDs for the duo this year, Burrows to Chase?
You were determined to change that man's name.
Yes, I am.
Joe Burrow is going to obviously light it up, but I think it's spread around a little bit more. I mean, obviously Chase is still going to have a really nice year, but I think he's more like 10, 11, which is still a good number. I mean, 9 to 11 touchdowns is still really good, and 1,180 or so yards receiving is still really good. It's just not going to be the crazy off the charts, Randy Moss kind of numbers that he may have put up previously. But they have a really good group of other players to throw the football to. So I think that they're going to, partially because teams are going to really want to take Chase away, that's going to help, Boyd. It's going to help Higgins to have a bigger year this year. And obviously, Joe Mixon's a really good receiver of the ball as well.
Who replaces Eli Apple?
I mean, obviously, I wanted to say something like anything, but but I'll try to give you a serious answer.
My thoughts right now are Trey Flowers or the second pick, Cam Taylor.
Right. I mean, I think that's why one of the reasons why he was selected was to fill that hole in their roster. So the team as currently constructed is first of all, a young team, right? This is a team where they only have a couple of players who are past their 28th birthday. So it's a team that is definitely young. Flowers is a zone guy. He was a safety mostly. He played both in college, but was mostly a safety. I had him evaluated as a safety when he's coming out of Oklahoma State. When I heard he was being played at corner, I was like, okay. I'll admit I was a little surprised, a little taken aback by that. And he's managed to hold up mostly. But I think you'll see Cam Taylor-Britt. I think I think Allen George will probably be in that fight. Another rookie. They also like Delonte Hood, who's might be a practice squad guy because he's so young. Dax Hill is going to play some corner. He's going to play a bunch of different things, right? He's going to be their taller, version of Honey Badger. What do you call him? He's going to play outside and inside and safety and a little bit of all of that. So they'll share the load, but the person they would most like to see win the job, I believe, they most like to win the job. Obviously, Chidobe Awuzie is another guy that's going to be out there. So between Awuzie, you mentioned Flowers, Cam Taylor-Britt, those are all guys who are kind of in the mix. And like I said, they're going to play, 3 safeties, but one of those safeties is going to be basically just a hybrid player, and Dax Hill's going to do that at times as well. So, teams, we talk about base defense. Well, nowadays, nickel is base, James. I mean, people are in nickel more than they are in their quote-unquote base defense. So you're going to see a lot of those guys on the field at the same time.
Record
for them?
Yes.
I think 12-5 sounds about right to me. I mean, I think that they don't go back to the Super Bowl, but I think that they're still. I mean, they have a lot of young players, as mentioned before. This team, the arrow is still pointed up on this team. It's just so hard to, as I said, it's so hard to repeat, even to get back, let alone to win it. I just think they end up coming up a little short in the playoffs, but they're keep being good though.
Fantasy pickups off of this team. If you're drafting,
I mean, once again, the joke answer is anybody. But I mean, this is going to be one of the more prolific offenses in the NFL, James. I mean, obviously, if you can get Mixon, which he's going to be hard to get, But I mean, if you have somebody that somebody else really, really likes, and you can make a deal for Mixon, you should do it. I think he's going to have a monster year. I think he's going to have an absolute like one of those Ricky Waters years where it's like 1,400 yards rushing and another, 300 and something, 400 something yards receiving. He's a guy that might put up 13 to 15 total touchdowns between receiving and rushing. He's going to have a monster year. I mean, Chase is probably going to go too early, right? Because I think his production is going to come down a little bit because all the factors I mentioned earlier, all the talent the team has, and the fact that defenses are going to really, 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 really want to take him away, which I think is going to open things up. But, I mean, I think if you're truly asking me, T. Higgins is the guy I'm going after because I think he's still undervalued in a lot of fantasy drafts, and I think he's going to be the guy that gets a really large percentage of the touchdown share in the reception game. So I like T. Higgins a lot. You can usually get him a little later. Well, it depends on how good the other people I mean, every league's different. So you might have a bunch of sharps in your leagues. We might go fairly early, but I like him a lot.
Way too early, Joe Burrow.
I mean, okay, so just to sort of walk through the Bengals ADP, right? The average draft position. I mean, any quarterback, I don't care who you are, is somebody that I'm not touching until third, fourth round, depending upon, how deep a league it is and things like that. But he's going to be one of the top 4 quarterbacks probably in terms of just point production because this team's going to score points. I mean, I don't think that's really news to anybody. So to me, T. Higgins is a guy you take somewhere between pick 32 and 40. To me, Burrow is a guy you take somewhere between pick 39 and 50. Maybe somewhere in there. And once again, it's not about the quality of player. It's about the difference between the other players available at that position, right? You can get really productive quarterbacks even fairly late in fantasy drafts. So, don't ever reach on it. In my opinion, you should never reach on a QB.
Now, I'm going to change this rotation around here because I don't know who's going to be the quarterback of the Clowns. So I'm going to move them right now from second to last because hey, is it going to be Brissett? Is it going to be Baker? So.
Well, I mean, at the moment, the guy getting starters reps is clearly
Jacoby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with the Ratbirds next. Now, Ryan Clark says that Lamar should be paid like Patrick Mahomes. What do you think about that?
Well,
I mean, we know that the salary, the way that the salary has been displaced on quarterbacks here. I mean, we know that he's going to get a certain number. We know
everybody's going to get every solid starter is going to get more money than you think is right. So get used to that idea, right? The Kirk Cousins deal is going to very soon just seem like a ho-hum. Yeah, sure, that seems right. So people go from outraged to completely, unimpressed with quarterback deals very quickly because the market resets every time someone signs a new deal, James. And it's been true since Joe Willie Namath. I mean, every time somebody signs a big deal, it resets the market. So, he might be the highest paid player in football, potentially, when he signs. He's played this, despite the fact he doesn't have an agent, very smartly. He's waited. He's been very patient. He hasn't made any noise. He hasn't been problematic. He's, not negotiating in the press. None of that. He's been very patient. He's letting things play out. And he's going to gamble on himself, as they say. But yes, he's going to get a deal. And it's going to be a big one. How big depends on lots of other factors. But he's going to be one of the top 4 or 5 paid players. And of course, they're going to be quarterbacks, but except maybe Aaron Donald. But he's going to be one of the top 4 or 5 paid players in the NFL. And he, frankly, deserves it because that offense works because of him, James. If you throw Jacoby Brissett into that offense, and I'm not picking on him. I liked Jacoby Brissett. I liked him coming out of college. Liked him at Florida, and then I thought Florida made a mistake in not making him their starter, and so when they did, he goes to NC State and has a really nice career there. But yeah, I think he'll hold the fort quite well, but he's going to depress the value. We were talking fantasy. He will depress the value of some of the players, particularly the guys that like to work deep down the field, right? Your tight ends, however, so I guess the Joku thing might be somewhat justified because the Joku probably get targeted more than he's ever. Well, it will. He will get targeted more than he ever has before in his life. He's part of the money they're paying. But yeah, that's where I am on that. And yeah, I think it's going to be Jacoby Brissett unless some sort of minor miracle takes place. It would take a minor miracle for Baker ever to lace him up.
No, we're talking about Lamar.
Well, I told you that Lamar's going to get a lot of money. I mean, I don't know the exact – obviously, no one knows the exact number, but it'll be a big one. I promise you that. It'll be a big number, James. A lot of zeros, probably, a lot of zeros, like 8, 9. Well, hold on.
But when you look at, we always talk about availability. When you look at, the availability of Patrick Mahomes and the impact of him on his team compared to the available of Lamar and his availability on his team. Now, I mean, of course, both teams are better when those guys are, playing their positions. But it would seem on the life chart or on the injury chart that Mahomes is much more available.
Sure. Well, it's a couple of things. One is the way he plays. He's incredibly instinctive, right? And he does take off and run sometimes. But the way he plays is usually about extending and exposing things in the defense as opposed to picking up yards with his feet. So he's quite capable of doing it, right? But he knows what kind of athlete he is. And he knows he's not going to run away from people. So he doesn't try to do that. Like, that's not his goal. He's trying to pick up a few extra yards or extend a play. But, he knows that if he somehow finds himself 12 yards downfield, he should start looking for a good place to slide. He's not trying to juke people. He's not stiff-arming people. He's not none of that. He's not hurdling anybody, James. He's a good athlete, though, right? We've seen him play basketball. We've seen him play baseball. He's terrific at all sports that he tried seriously. And he's a good enough baseball player to have college offers and to get drafted for baseball. Not quite the same level of basketball prospect. Obviously, the same level of football. Not the same level as a basketball prospect. He could have played in college, at a lower level. And, obviously, we know, enough said about football. But Lamar isn't – I wouldn't say – he's not injury prone. I think that would be an exaggeration. And he's worked really hard on his body. He's up to about 220 pounds this offseason. So that may help him to stay healthier. So he's put on about 7-8 pounds of muscle. And that doesn't sound like a huge amount, but when you look on his body, you can see it. You can see, especially in the lower body, you can see that, where he's thickened up. But the best way to protect your quarterback is to do what? Run the football. And they're going to run the football a lot. They're going to run the football well. So you're talking about a team that will probably be one of the most, if not the most, run-heavy team in the league. A quarterback who, once again, is, young, coming into his prime. So yes, he's going to get paid a lot. I mean, one way or the other, either long-term deal or if they franchise tag him. I mean, I don't know if you checked out what the franchise tag is on quarterbacks, Dave, but you can live on it.
Oh yes, you most definitely. I think you can live on it pretty well. But you spoke about the running game. We saw what happened to J.K. Dobbins last season, and he ended up missing most of it. So, J.K. Dobbins, comeback player of the year, or is he going to be replaced by Mike Davis? I know fantasy-wise, you've watched both of these guys.
Yeah, I'm a big Mike Davis fan, but Mike wasn't brought in to replace anybody. He's been brought in to supplement, right? So short of another serious injury, he will see probably 20-25% of the snaps. And the lion's share will continue to go to J.K. Dobbins. And J.K. Dobbins has, when healthy, has proven to be very productive. So I don't think there's going to be – I don't think he necessarily wins comeback player of the year, but I think he's going to be in the top 4 or 5 in the voting.
What about that defensive line having to replace Brandon Williams and Justin Ellis? What do you think that new defensive line is going to look like?
Well, I mean, I think the draft is one of the ways that they addressed it. And obviously, as you probably heard, though, obviously he's an exterior player, they just signed Jason Pierre-Paul. So the Ravens are a team that runs, a hybrid 3-4 defense. And, it's something you've seen before. They share a lot of DNA, almost literally, but definitely figuratively, with the Patriots. If you look down the list of staff members in their front office and coaching staff, you'll find a lot of mention of the Patriots. So while they aren't doing it exactly the Patriot way, they're doing it kind of the Patriot way, James. There's a lot of patriotisms, however you want to put it. There's a lot of patriotness, whatever term you want to use to describe it, in what they do and how they do it. And I am of the opinion that some of these things will be done to some extent sort of by, and they recently added Brett Hundley, right? You mentioned injury prone. They found him another quarterback. And of course, Tyler Huntley, Brett Hundley, say that 14 times fast. But the way the team is constructed, they want to play good defense, great defense, in fact. They want to run the football and then dagger you deep down the field off of play action, right? They have a better group of receivers than people recognize. One of my favorite undrafted free agents was Shamar Bridges, who I talked about being one of my standouts, my favorite players at the HBCU Legacy Bowl. He landed there. They also drafted Mekhi Polk. They brought in Raleigh Webb as an undrafted free agent. And Benjamin Victor, who's going to be on the bubble. He's going to be fighting for his life, but they have him. They brought back Jalen Moore. But on the defense side, and that's what you asked me about, on the defensive side, they have Kyle Fuller, right, who is, an addition to the team. They drafted Jalen Arbor-Davis. Marcus Peters still there. Marlon Humphrey still there. Tony Jefferson, Geno Stone. And they drafted Kyle Hamilton. Chuck Clark, another guy that, some people wanted to see them move on from him. But they drafted some athletic players. Jacoby McClain, the linebacker from Auburn, is a good athlete. Diego Fudo came in from the Naval Academy. He's a terrific young man and a really good football player as well. But in terms of the big guys, right? So Justin Madubuike is more of he's an interior pass rush type, right? He's not the big body guy. They still brought back Calais Campbell. Michael Pierce is the run plugger. Broderick Washington Jr. is another guy that's got, sort of that. But the one that I want you to watch out for on the defense, and Derek Wolfe. They also added Derek Wolfe, who's a veteran, but he's going to play some. But the guy I want you to look out for among all their defensive linemen, the one that I think has the greatest, amongst the younger guys, has the greatest impact, is the draft pick they got. And I think I got a great deal on him, but from UConn, from Connecticut, Travis Jones, who had really good tape and then goes to the Senior Bowl, has a terrific Senior Bowl, and goes from being a guy that people saw as a day 3 prospect to a solid day 2 prospect, in my mind at least. But they got a real steal in him, and I think he's going to have a really good season.
Record.
That's a good one. 11-6. I think they'll be right on the heels of the Bengals the whole season, though.
Fantasy picks.
So I'm a big Rashawn Bateman guy. I drafted him last season, and then, injury and stuff like that. But in the games that he played, you could see he's got something, right? Route runner, good speed, good size. I think he has a breakout year. And yeah, Dobbins, you might get cheaper now because of the injury stuff, but I think he has a bounce back season. And I really, really like their group of receivers. Like I said, I mentioned some of them already. I like Prochet. I think he ends up having probably the best season of his career thus far in terms of production. I'm also a fan. I mentioned the undrafted free agent. Like, he always won't, short it unless it's injuries, he won't play that much. But I think Devin Duvernay plays more this year. But the guy that I really have my eye on is Tylan Wallace. I think that the battle for what used to be Hollywood Brown's, snaps and targets are going to be between Prochet and Wallace. And so of the two, my money's on Wallace. But I won't be shocked if Prochet ends up being the guy that gets more snaps. But they're both talented. But I think that one of those two ends up being very fantasy relevant. And obviously the real target in the passing game is Rashad Bateman. And obviously, as mentioned, Dobbins is the guy on the ground. And Lamar is going to be both, because that's Lamar does.
Now, as much as I would really like to think that my Steelers would be not in the bottom of this, I have to put the Browns ahead because of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, the running game. I have to give them the edge. So I'm going to talk about the Clowns next. Bill, is this a breakout year for Donovan Peoples-Jones?
Maybe. See, this is where the whole quarterback situation really. So we talk about this. If you want to find breakouts on the wide receiver position, really any position, especially wide receivers, you want to look for two things. One, right, is this player going to get the number of touches or targets necessary to give them a chance? And I think the answer is probably yes to that. But the other thing is, what is he best at? And he can do some of everything, but his real contribution has been the deep threat, the guy that's running those 9 routes and running those 8 routes and just running past people. If they have a quarterback who's unable to hit him in stride or lead him up the field or things like that, some of his production will come down. But yeah, I mean, I still like him, and if I can get him at the right place, the right price, how you gonna think of it? Yeah, it's a player I'd be willing to take. I just don't want to get too high on him because of the quarterback uncertainty.
What about the safety John Johnson? They gave him a boatload of money, but is this the year that he has to prove that he's worthy of it?
Well, and once again, it comes down to how you outvalue the position. I think he will be an above-average starter. I just don't think he'll be a superstar, but he's going to be a good starter for them.
And what about like I said, talking about this quarterback situation, you think Baker will be Brissett's backup?
I mean, on the depth chart, you could put whatever. You could put, Humpty Dumpty on the depth chart.
Well, they've excused Baker from mandatory OTAs, so
right, and from everything else, probably. So they're hoping, one, to make sure he doesn't get hurt, so he can maintain his trade value. So you won't see him being put in situations where he might get injured, because there goes his trade value if he gets hurt. So they're hoping that, I should say hoping, but they're proceeding with the understanding that at some point a contender may lose their starting quarterback, and he will probably be the most attractive option available, during, this season, if there's a lot of things are going to happen with him. But if Jacoby Brissett is indeed the guy that starts all or the vast majority of the games for them, yeah, that's not going to help the deep threat types. Though he has a decent arm, but they're going to really lean heavily on the run game, as you probably already guessed. So it's a great team to pick up running backs, right? I mean, look at what Dearness Johnson did when he got a chance to play. I think he went for 120 yards plus when he got his chance to finally see the field. So it's clear that they have a really good offensive line, well-designed running game, and good running backs.
And what do you think their record will be? Considering that we don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. But let's just say on and I'm going to put this on the minimum side. Let's just say that Watson's not available for the first 8 games of the season.
Right. And, I mean, it's still possible Brissett might get the split. Below 1 and 3 is probably more realistic, but not 1 and 3, sorry. 3 and 5 or 2 and 6 is probably more realistic. But if he holds the fort reasonably well, they don't lose the whole season basically, he'll still be appreciated. The Browns are in an interesting position because in construction they actually are fairly similar to the Bengals, right? Only their alpha dog receiver has moved on. They don't have him anymore. But at one point, I mean, they had a very similar. Basically, their Joe Mixon was 2 guys instead of 1 guy, and they had a better offensive line. But a lot of the other points in the way that those 2 teams are constructed were actually quite similar. And now mom. Fancy relevant Browns. Well, Njoku, like I said before, should probably thrive in this environment. Brissett likes throwing to the tight end. Njoku's a good athlete. One of the more athletic tight ends in the league. Both of their running backs are going to catch the ball, so obviously whichever one of the running backs is available, if there's a Browns running back available, and you're picking, somewhere beyond the first, second or third, if somehow one of them makes it to you, you should take whichever one it is that made it to you. because they're both going to produce. They're both going to see a lot of touches. I wouldn't be surprised if, combined between the two, if they out-touched Brissett or had more opportunities to do something with the ball than Brissett will probably have. And I don't think it's because people don't like him or don't trust him. I just think it's how the team is constructed, and they want to beat you running the football. And they frankly should run the ball even more than they do because they're so good at it.
Record. See, you got 12-5 Bengals. You got 11-6 Ratbirds. So, well, we got the Clowns.
Yeah. Well, some of this once again depends on facts, not in evidence. But I'm going to go with the assumption that Brissett starts, if not all, then most of the games for them. So, if indeed that is what happens, I will say 7-10 if it's Brissett starting the vast majority of the year.
Okay. Now let's talk about my favorite team, and of course, a team that's close to your heart also, but the Steelers. Najee, put up a shut-up year?
No. I mean, he had a great rookie season. Najee's fine. Everyone knows he's good. He might see a few fewer touches this season because he had speaking of Ricky Waters, I mean, he had an enormous touch load last year. I mean, he was by far the most valuable running back in the league last year, which because of so much of the heat he took off from other people in that offense. So yeah, he's going to have another great year, but
I'm really looking at his backups. Benny Snell. It doesn't. I mean, the reason why I say put up a shut up is because it seems to me like he's the only viable running back that you could possibly get from the Steelers as far as fantasy value. Did I lose you there?
No, I just didn't hear the last thing you said.
No, I said when you look at the depth of the Steelers running backs, it's Najee or bust.
Yes, which is fine. I mean, teams. Well, I mean, the Browns being a major exception, but teams don't tend to invest a lot of time, money, and energy into the backup running back because the running back position itself is seen by most teams as one that is now the market's been depressed, right? The market has come down. And, if you have one true bell cow running back, you're fine without having another, you just need the other ones to be one to, spell your main person, your main running back. But if truly something is gone very, very wrong, then yes, you can say, that, we've got the ability to go out and be aggressive and improve, if we have to. But I just think that most teams don't care, but they really put their investments, and I would say somewhat wisely, into making sure that they have what they need at the starting positions. And then, backup running backs are seen as, I mean, if they're young, they're usually special teams guys, right? And then, if you're an older backup running back, then you are, a guy that maybe is helping to bring along the main guy. Maybe you're better in blitz pickup, or maybe, but it's, the way the running back position is now, you really only need, most teams only need one real, can do everything running back.
I'm looking at our offensive line here. And one of the things that surprised me is that they paid right tackle Okafor, but we also have a rookie, a second-year rookie, Dan Moore Jr. is playing left tackle, and he seems to have been adequate, last year in his performance. Who do you trust more, the second-year left tackle Moore, or the recently laughing all the way to the bank Okafor?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm not completely sold on either of the two, quite frankly, James. But I mean, gun to my head, I guess I would say Okafor. But I think both guys are guys that are placeholders for a better player down the road.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised that they paid Okafor because I thought they would save that money and like you say, pick a better right tackle somewhere down the road. Um, looking at our wide receiver core now, uh, I, maybe I'm wrong in the way that I look at this, but I've had Claypool for a couple of years now, and his inconsistency to me makes him a fantasy bust. But we did pick up Pickens. Johnson, he did his job. I was quite surprised, but he also had a lot of drops. Uh, should we perhaps kick the tires on DK while he's out there?
I mean, you can kick the tires all you want, but what are you going to give them, right? Um, I
Well,
mean,
I'm just looking at all the other miracles that seem to have happened. I mean, you look at the Saints, you look at the Rams. I mean, uh,
right. But those were teams that had, extra draft assets or things like that. It's certainly fun, to talk about, but DeKalen Zechariah's Metcalf is an intriguing player. I'm not so sure he's the big need right now for the Steelers. Fun player, but sure, it'd be cool to have him, but I mean, I think the Steelers' needs are elsewhere, quite frankly. And I don't worry that much about the Steelers have done a really good job of drafting and developing receivers over the past, I don't know, 55 years. I mean, it's a position they normally get right more often than they get it wrong. And, even when the Lima Swedes and things like that happen, they tend to right the ship very quickly. I don't know. It just feels like a nice, fun piece, but this team has other bigger needs.
Vegas says the over under for Kenny Pickett starting is 4 games. What's your thoughts?
Okay.
Do you hear
Yeah.
me?
I'm sorry. What was the last thing you said?
I said Vegas says that the over or under for Pickett starting is 4 games. What's your thoughts on that?
That's probably about right. I think that once the bye week comes and goes, it's probably up for grabs. I believe that they want Trubisky to have the job, or especially early on, but a lot of things could happen. If he plays extremely well, which is certainly possible, then that most likely keeps Pickens on the bench with the exception of like mop up duty and things like that, for most of all the season. However, if he shows he's not, a number one, an alpha, whatever, then they'll have to move on, and that's the whole point of drafting. Is to not be stuck with a player you aren't in love with at the most important position in the game.
Record.
This hurts to say, James. I think they end up probably a game below 500.
8-9.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's what I gave him. Now, I will. I mean, everybody knows I'm a Steeler fan, but I'm not really looking at to pick up any Steelers in my fantasy league. What about you?
Well, I mean, obviously Najee is going to have a great year. He's going to catch the ball. He's going to run with the ball. He's going to get the ball a lot. I have Pat Fryermuth in a couple of dynasty leagues.
Yeah.
I think he's going to produce.
Yeah, second year tight end. But I'm still concerned about who's going to be throwing in the ball.
Sure, I mean I can understand that. I've decided to take some of the risk out by looking at guys that even with poor to very poor quarterback play, still are likely to produce. So I'm genuinely and primarily, looking at players that work underneath and work the flats and things like that. And yeah, they'll push the ball down deep sometimes as well, but I don't think that's what. No matter who the quarterback is, I don't think that's going to be their bread and butter this year.
Let's go through the AFC South, starting with the Colts here. Their wide receiver core, very youthful. None of them are over 28 years old. Bill, is Pittman a number one? And should they try to re-sign veteran T.Y. Hilton?
I think Pittman is a number one, or at least a very high-end number two. It's one that sort of blurs the line between the two. But I think by most people's definition, high-end, lower end number one to higher end number two. I think that, the breakout is still coming, though I think this year's going to be a good one. I think that there's still, an awakening to come, and that particular player is going to be part of it.
Matty Ice, the bridge or the solution?
Oh, well, I mean, depends on which thing you try to order. But I think he's going to really stabilize that team. And I think he helps with culture. I think he helps with understanding what it takes to play week in, week out. I think it's a really great hire.
And how important is it for Nagahu to hit the ground running? We know that defense, especially the running defense, is one of the weaknesses of the Colts. What do you think about him as an addition, Yannick?
What was the player's name? Which name?
Yannick, was it Nagahu? I think.
Yannick Ngakoue. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So have sack will travel, right? He's been around the league for only a handful of years. He's on his third team, I believe. So he is a person with a really nice array of pass rush moves, and I think he's going to have a nice, solid season. I don't think he's going to lead the league or anything, but I expect he could easily be in that 9 to 11.5 range in terms of sacks, I believe.
Record for the Colts.
That's a great question. Well, I'll start by saying this. I think that I'll go ahead and roll the dice. Yeah, 11-6.
Let me roll up their schedule here right quick, because I think the Colts, what conference do they play? Here we go. Okay. They start off with the Texans, then the Jaguars, the Chiefs, the Titans, the Broncos, the Jaguars again, the Titans again, the Commanders, the Patriots. They don't have a bye until, what is it?
You said until what?
I'm looking to see when their bye week is now. Let's see. Okay, they play every week up until the 16th. The first break is the Commanders, I think, on the 30th of October. But until then, they play the Texans, the Jaguars, the Chiefs, the Titans twice, the Broncos, the Jaguars again, and then the Commanders. So it seems like they have a chance getting out of the first half of their season with a pretty good record. But then let's see, they finish up with the the Texans, the Giants, the Chargers, the Vikings, the Cowboys, the Steelers, and the Eagles. So, what do you say? 11 and
I think
7,
it's 11-6. Yeah,
12, 12
11,
and 6. I mean, yeah, 12 and
11.
6,
I said 11-6.
11 and 6. Okay.
Yeah, because 12 would be too many.
Okay. Now let's talk about the Titans. Pro Football Focus says that Vrabel is among the top 10 head coaches in the league. Do you agree?
That sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right. I have him in that sort of second tier in the top 10, but yeah, I think he's in the top 10. I don't have him, quite up there with Belichick, or he's not quite at the top of the top, but I have guys like Andy Reid and guys like that are top of the top, but he's in that bottom of the top, I guess, that second 5 of the 10.
What about Tannehill? Do you think he's going to be able to survive a full season? We talked about how many times he got sacked last season with that offensive line. What do you think? I mean, is it an offensive line or is it an offensive line?
It's a good question. We've talked earlier when we talked about Deshaun Watson about how the league is hopefully maturing in the way it recognizes, certain things that have gone on and hopefully won't be going on regarding stuff like that. The offensive line or offensive line. That's a good line. But I think that we're going to see cohesion at some point, unit cohesion, right? A term I'm sure you've heard many times. I think once you start to see some unit cohesion, they will pick up the pace. But they might have their struggles early on. Whenever there's a fair amount of turnover in an offensive line, I think usually you can spot it in the early parts of the season, and then eventually it starts to improve.
What do you think about Malik Willis falling to them at number 86?
Well, I don't think he fell. I think the NFL always thought that he was around there, and it was, fans and fanalists and, journalists and other people that pushed him or tried pushing him up the board. But this time the NFL wouldn't go for it, right? We've seen it happen before where a team, needs something and this player says, somebody says, oh, that player is that thing we need. Even if they didn't produce like it, didn't test like it, and nothing indicates they should be that kind of player. But, hope is very often a powerful intoxicant. But yeah, that's that.
Right. Speaking of that offensive line, they got a pretty good running back, Derrick Henry. What's your thoughts about his?
Yep. And he's got I think he has another couple of productive years in him, though he might not be quite the same player he was when he was a little younger. He's still big, strong, and fast at a level that is difficult sometimes to, to make it make sense in your mind. And they gave him a lot of touches last year, and I think they're going to dial back. Sort of like we talked about Chase. I think it benefits some of the pass receivers as well as backup running backs. I think they want to just take some of that workload off Derrick Henry, not all of it. And I think what they're going to do sort of consciously is, start him very slowly at the beginning of the season and start ramping him up so that by the time playoff time rolls around, he's on a full back.
What's their record?
I think they're going to have a good year. 12-5. I think it's going to be a good team.
So you think they're going to have a better record than the Colts?
You said the New Orleans?
No, than the Colts.
Yeah, I think they end up. Once again, it's sort of like we talked about in the when we talked about the NFC North. They nip at their heels the whole year long, though. I think it's going to be, I could see the Colts and the Titans swapping some paint this year.
Fantasy, yeah, got to get in the fantasy out. Of course, Derrick Henry we mentioned, but no AJ Brown. What are you going to do? Any wide receivers we should look out for? Fantasy picks for the Titans.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's still going to be a productive offense, right? The offense didn't suddenly just cease to operate. So I feel fairly confident that they will continue to do all right. um, and in terms of players that I could see, uh, I mean, obviously we don't need to talk about the most obvious one, I don't believe. But in what I will say is in Dynasty, if you get a good offer on Derrick Henry, you might want to move on from him. I got a quote unquote offer I can't refuse and moved on from him. I think that in Dynasty it makes sense because he probably is going to start showing some signs of wear or tear this year and slowly, slowing up a little bit. But though people don't talk about Robert Woods very much, I think he's going to have a really good year. And he's a guy that you might get late in a lot of fantasy drafts. I think that Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is another guy that's going to get more run than people are realizing. Traylon Burks is going to see the field a fair amount for a rookie. And then beyond those sort of that big group there, I would also say, very late, maybe one of the last picks of your draft and you don't have any more needs. You might just want to roll the dice on a guy like Kyle Phillips. So I think might be their slot receiver of the future. We didn't mention him by name. Well, some of us mentioned by name, but the things about people like Derrick Henry, and they got another power back, a guy who's sort of similar. I mean, not as talented, but physically sort of similar in Hassan Haskins, a tall, sort of stiffish running back. Dontrell Hilliard is still fighting off all challengers, but still on the roster at the moment. And then Trent Cannon, Virginia State University, so some HBCU football love amongst running backs. I also really like Julius Chestnut, who they brought in as an undrafted free agent. I hope that one or both of those guys make the squad.
The Texans, we kind of mentioned it. Lovie Smith promoted the head coach. Your thoughts on the stability of not changing radical change, but Lovie Smith experienced has already been with the team. What do you think about that promotion internally rather than trying to go outside?
Well, anytime you try to mend fences or whatever term you use, when you're trying to accomplish something where you're sort of reaching out, it's a challenge, right? It's difficult. If it was easy, everybody do it. What was the second part of your question?
The promotion internally instead of going outside, less pressure or more pressure?
Well, I guess internally it's less pressure because it's something that you probably saw coming a little bit. And externally, like with fans, whatever, it can sometimes be more because fans very often want what they want, James, right? They want someone that they've heard of. Hey, Louis Riddick, he's on television. He's a guy I like. I mean, but yes, I think internally there's not too much pressure because he's a known quantity in the building.
What grade would you give the Texans draft?
That's an interesting question. I don't really do draft grades, but I'll guess I'll sort of go away from my normal answer to that. I mean, if you were forcing me to give it a grade as opposed to just talking about, round by round, did they get the most value that they could? I would give it a B minus probably in terms of just, attempting to grade the draft as a whole.
We talked about other destinations for Baker Mayfield, and this was certainly one that has been mentioned in the past. But I'm thinking when you have a second-year quarterback like Mills, who has shown you some flashes and a lot of potential, do you think that the addition of a Baker Mayfield would be more harmful or helpful to a second-year quarterback like Mills, if
You,
that should happen?
you're
I mean,
saying, okay, wait, what would be harmful or helpful?
no, what I'm asking is, okay, this is Mills' second year,
Yep.
and he's like I said, he showed some potential. He showed,
Yeah.
that he could be the quarterback of the future. But we also spoke about the idea of a $5 million Baker Mayfield hanging out there. They're just kind of sitting out there. So if the Texans should by chance think about kicking the tires on Baker Mayfield, do you think that this would be more helpful or harmful to a second year quarterback like Mills?
Yeah, I think they're in the process of committing to Mills until he gives them some reason not to feel like they've committed to him. So I think it's unlikely they pursue Mayfield. Now, I might literally find out tomorrow that I was wrong. But my read of it is that there's a team that's rebooting, rebuilding, and re-whatevering. And so they would, I think they want to continue to be young and maybe even get younger as they essentially try to find spots. But yeah, I don't think you have to worry about having to do anything too crazy for the interview.
And what do you think the Texans' record will be this year?
Uh, let's see. I'm going to say 6-11.
Yeah, that's about where I had them too, especially in that division. Uh, you can see some possible. I mean, the Jags are in that division. A couple of and their uh, schedule doesn't seem to be uh, that hard. I mean, it's an above average schedule, but when you get to play the big teams when you're on the bottom of the end of the rung. So, any fantasy value in the Texans?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Now, Davis Mills is probably only worth considering, at least at this, well, in Dynasty, he's very much worth considering because the arrows pointed strongly up for him. But in terms of if you're in like a normal, like a redraft league where, you need consistent production week in and week out, then, he's probably not the move yet, right? But I think Brandon Cooks is a guy that is a bit of a steal and probably should have gone or should go earlier than he's been going in most dynasty drafts. I mean, John Macy's getting sort of redshirted. Marlon Mack is there, but I think he's firmly ensconced as a change of pace backup type. And let's see, is there another receiver that sort of demands that you? Yeah, there's not a lot of players you have to have off their yeah. So but I think that they are going in the right direction, and obviously it helps so much when you have an inexpensive young quarterback to get your act together. But yeah, in my opinion, the players to target would be Brandon Cooks. I guess in this order, Brandon Cooks is a player worth targeting. If Mechie is able to go out there and play, and especially in Dynasty, he's worth targeting. Nico Collins, this is his best chance. This would be by far his best chance to prove what he can do. If he doesn't make it here, I don't think he makes an A place. So I'm wishing him good luck.
Okay, and last but not least, let's talk about the Jaguars. Trayvon has inked his rookie contract, standard rookie contract with the Jags. How surprised were you that the Jags made Walker the first pick instead of Hutchinson?
So you said Walker over
Yes.
Hutchinson. We talked. I thought we mentioned this before. It's a ceiling versus floor argument, right? I think Walker's floor scares me so much that I wouldn't take him anywhere close to that early. I like him in the 20s, and I'm not crazy for him then, but I like him in the 20s. Now, if I can get him around 33 or something, then then I'm excited. That's what I like. I think that's where, to me, it's about where his value is, in that 20s to upper 30s range. But when you're making any sort of decisions about those kinds of things, you want to take in all the information possible, and some do a better job of taking that information and analyzing it than others.
Left tackle Cam Robinson signs a 3-year, $54 million extension deal. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, one is it shows you, once again, as I said before, that they're expecting to be a good amount of more money in that new TV deal and the salary cap. They're expecting the salary cap to expand. That would have to be what they're expecting.
Talking about the expectations, they gave Darius Williams a lot of money, but
Yep.
What does that mean for Tyson Campbell? Is he project guaranteed to start now?
Well, I don't think anybody's guaranteed. I think that they're going to have the good old-fashioned open competition, and the best, as I say, the best man wins.
But looking at that depth chart, is Tyson Campbell that man?
Well, I mean, at the very moment, is that what you're saying? Immediately, I think that there's a chance at it, but like I said, I think they're going to have an open competition, and I think either of them has a chance to win it. And of course, obviously, as mentioned previously, it's not 1970 anymore. You may well have 6 defensive backs on the out there.
Yeah, that is true. Jags record.
I think they're not the worst team in football, but I think they're still in the bottom 3. So I'm going to say 5-12.
Surely, considering that they're the Jags, you're going to probably see a lot of their players available in the late rounds. But any fantasy value for the Jaguars?
Well, once again, in Dynasty, Trevor Lawrence makes sense because he's, young and pretty good, and he's very, very likely to get better, potentially exponentially better. Let's see. Other Jaguars that at least make a certain amount of sense. Well, some of it comes down to health, right? They really have struggled to stay healthy to some extent. But if indeed they manage to, get their quarterback, their best running back, and some of those other guys to stay healthy, that should be interesting to see. They have a couple of interesting retreads at wide receiver in Zay Jones, who they gave a significant amount of money to, and Laquan Treadwell out on the outside. I think Marvin Jones will have a good solid year. But the player that, and once again, this is the last year I'm going to keep sort of stumping or keeping up for this guy, but I saw him in college, and all the things you hear people say about Deebo Samuel were to some extent true of him, except he's bigger, and that's Laviska Shenault. I hope that he can, because, they brought in a couple of big-ish money free agents in Zay Jones and bringing in Christian Kirk. And I thought, we could, I guess, maybe match that, but I didn't think that was the approach. I wanted to look at something, whether it be I don't know. I just think that's a lot needs to happen for this team to be relevant as an NFL relevant, but they do have 1 or 2 players, and I think I mentioned, so in a dynasty league, Trevor Lawrence makes good sense. And that's almost it for Dynasty. I'm exaggerating slightly. But yeah, I mean, there's some of the guys, you might pick up later for Dynasty. But in terms of a redraft league, it's the last pick, and you just feel like, you already drafted your kicker. You can do whatever you want. I might take one last flyer on Laviska Shenault, who, if is used correctly, which is a giant if, but if he's used correctly and he gets, 12 to 16, 17, repetitions in a must-have game, I think you might see him rise to the occasion. And, if people don't know his exact age, they might think he's older.
What about ATN in a dynasty league?
Travis Etienne. Yeah, I mean, he's worth it in dynasty as well. And, the running back position, as we talked about, is, I mean, he's going to be a timeshare with James Robinson. They also drafted Snoop Connor. They brought in Raquel Armstead, so, and then a couple of college free agents in Makai Sargent and also Nathan Cottrell. But I don't think those guys are a threat to either people we just mentioned. I think that the jobs that are up for grabs are one is to see who ends up starting. So once that's over, and who's not starting is now in the pot to see who's going to be number two. And I guess between Snoop Connor, Travis Etienne, and James Robinson, if nothing else, I bet that Deshaun Watson's the fastest, the best word we're going to use at the getting to the getting there quickly, McDonald's wise or whatever.
Okay. Good going over both of these conferences with you. Next week, we will be doing the AFC East and West. What's your final thoughts for this for today, Bill? Glad you were able to stay with me, and we could go through the conferences and talk a little basketball and whatnot. Your final thoughts for the evening?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things that have been going through my mind the last few days. A lot has happened, James. A lot has happened. And, I talked about some of these things the last time we were here, and some of these things were things I didn't at all enjoy discussing. And, luckily, as far as I know, fingers crossed, today at least, nothing in that regard has taken place. But on this day, in 1946, Joe Louis defeated Billy Conn in 8, right? Knocks him out for the heavyweight boxing title. And one of the things about, Joe Louis is at the time, he was one of the first. Obviously Jackie Robinson had a slightly different impact when he comes on the scene, but one of the first Black athletes to be a hero, to be seen as a hero by white youngsters, white sports fans, young ones even. He became a national hero within the United States, and winning the fight against Max Schmeling in 38 obviously helped that. And he had 25 consecutive title defenses, winning 25 consecutive title defenses, which a record for all weight classes. He had the longest reign, single reign as champion. He was a terrific fighter. And I know for younger fans, they may not be quite aware of the extent of his greatness, but he was a truly great fighter. And, ludicrous power, right? He became, bigger than the sport to some extent. In that, I think there was even a couple of movies he appeared in, though that was not his talent. He was not an actor. But he had a really good amateur career, went 50-4 with 43 knockouts in his amateur career, which is pretty darn impressive. He turns pro and, had 3 losses in 69 fights, 52 knockouts. And like we said, that championship, that consecutive run of 37-49 was the longest still span of any heavyweight title holder. Obviously, when he comes back after retirement, he's not the same guy. He doesn't win the title back, and eventually gets knocked out by Marciano. But at his peak, at his best, though people talk about, and once again, I know if Dimitri's here, you talk about Muhammad Ali should be talked about, because in addition to what he did as a fighter, his incredible social impact and what he represented as a philanthropist. And he was so many different things, so many different people. But purely as a fighter, purely as a heavyweight champion, Joe Louis is every bit the fighter, every bit the champion that Muhammad Ali was. And, deserves to be mentioned as one of the top 3 or 4 heavyweights in my mind in the history of the game. And I have trouble thinking of more than, maybe 2 that I'd even put in the same category as him. So this is a day that, I want to make sure that we don't forget his greatness. And like I said, obviously one of the most famous Americans, not just black, one of the famous Americans of his lifetime. And, obviously one of the first, like I said, great national black sports heroes, up there with, Jesse Owens. And I guess kind of it in his time period. Later we had more, but he was really one of the first to be a national hero as a sports figure who was black.
Well, thank you, as I said, Bill, for sticking there with us. And I was kind of disappointed that you weren't able to join us Monday, but I know you're doing some great work getting the grants done and things like that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to contact you about some grant writing. But thank you so much. And
I wasn't sure I was going to make it because I've been pulling some all-nighters. So, but I did it. I'm pretty white, but I saw when everyone else bowed out. I was like, well, I guess I can't do the same. So I fought through, but I'm pretty wiped out.
I will. Hey, man, you have a good weekend. Appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday, and if not Monday, at least next Thursday.
Yeah, I should be available this coming Monday.
Shout out to Mr. Scott. He is at the Twins Yankees game.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he said he was sitting out there in right field, so I told him, make sure he takes a glove. Aaron Judge likes to go that way, so so we'll see. As I said, Demetrius is kind of stuck in Memphis. But we look to have him back next week. And thank everyone for listening. We appreciate your time. See you next week, Bill. You have a great weekend.
You too, sir. Good night.